Can't hear you. We can't hear you, Lee.
Thank you. I was just asking everybody to mute themselves, and here I was muted. Thank you for that. Welcome everybody to the Resident and Family Support Council. I do want to make sure everybody's aware that we are recording this, and that if you missed this or you need to leave early for any reason, or you want other people to hear the information that we shared today, to that it's on our YouTube page, and all you need to do is go to IL Ombudsman YouTube, and you'll be able to find that page. Just do a search and it's very easy to get to. There you'll see all of our past meetings that we've been able to record. So you might want to check that out. Just as a reminder, I wanted to welcome you to this Resident and Family Support Council meeting, where our goal here is to really empower people with information. I'm going to go ahead and mute some people. I'm getting some feedback from some people. If you can make sure that you're muted, that would be helpful. I'll go ahead and I'm just muting some people. There we go. Thank you. So what we really want to do is make sure that people have the information. So what we've been doing lately is taking some deeper dives into residents' rights and what residents' rights is all about. But before we begin talking about the residents' rights today, I want to introduce Carrie. Carrie just wanted to share some information, some legislative information with us. Carrie, if you'd like to go ahead and do that, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. So I have been working with State Representative Charlie Myers, and we introduced a bill earlier in this session that would require all long-term care facilities in Illinois to place information about the Ombudsman Program on the facility's homepage of their website, and it would be prominently placed. The bill passed the House unanimously.
Carrie, you just muted yourself.
And now the bill is sitting in the Senate, but unfortunately has not been assigned to a committee yet. And if it doesn't get assigned in the next few days, the bill will die in the Senate. So I've put all the information in the chat. I'm hoping people could take 5 minutes and call Representative Lightford's office. She is the chairperson of the assignment committee, and call Don Harmon's office, and he is the president of the Illinois Senate, and ask them to assign House Bill 4763 to a committee so we can get heard. Like I said, the bill will require facilities to put information on how to contact the ombudsman, and it will make it very clear that the ombudsman is a free advocacy program to help residents. It won't cost the state any money. It will not cost the facilities any money to do this. But for some reason, they're not moving it in the Senate, and I need help. And all of the information, including what I suggest, the short version of what you would tell them, is in the chat box for you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks you for sharing that, because we do want to make sure that people know about the Ombudsman Program. That was part of what we realized during the pandemic, is that people, it's mandatory that the facilities hang posters up about the Ombudsman Program. And if people weren't able to leave their rooms, they couldn't see those posters. So if they could go to the front page of the website, it would make things so much better and really help promote the program. So thank you for that. And that really leads us really to what we are talking about today, is this right to be able to, make complaints, and what does that all look like? So we've invited Teresa and John, am I correct? John, Teresa is actually the regional ombudsman for the Peoria area. And John is one of the community ombudsmen, and we are thrilled that both of you are able to join us to have this conversation and help walk us through what this complaint process kind of all looks like. You're muted, Teresa. We're all doing this today.
Button. Sorry, I'm never one to put a muzzle on myself, so that happened by accident. Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen, please. I do like to get confirmation that it's going well, because I do have a lot of self-doubt when it comes to technology. Can you guys see the screen with the people with their arms around each other? Do you see that?
Yes, we do.
Obviously, this screen was made before social distancing became a play on words for our daily lives, but I think they're all wearing masks. That's my image anyway, so I think we're all good. So what I'm going to talk to you today, I know that we're going to talk a little bit about information that you have access to, both as a resident and a family member when you're going into a facility. And so it's taking down barriers, because information is power when you stop and think about it. So when you see something like this and it says, okay, we already know what the Ombudsman Program does, well, there's nothing like repetition to really drive home a point, because everything does have a dotted line that goes back to resident rights. And so what we do in our program is to not only educate residents in facilities and educate those staff members that maybe have forgotten what they know about resident rights. We're also there to look into some systemic issues that might be going on in a facility or an individual complaint. So those are the two things that we really kind of hone in on when it comes to advocating for residents in facilities. So who do we serve? We serve all the older people and persons and adults with disabilities who reside in a long-term care facility. They are the residents of the facility. Those that receive Medicaid waiver services in their home, that's through a different program than the long-term care ombudsman in facilities. And we serve those on Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries and receive managed care for services. Just a little pat on the back for what we do. So when you look at this slide and you see that we have access to facilities and residents 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that really is what we are allowed to do. There are times we get pushback on that. So not only do residents get pushback when they're trying to make a complaint in a facility or trying to get something taken care of, we get pushback on that too. But with our tool belt that we all have as ombudsman, we educate the staff to let them know that we do have access to the facility 24 hours a day. And the facility cannot interfere with the resident's right to visit with us. And not just with us, but the right to visit with somebody who maybe is with a nonprofit legal aid agency, much like Prairie State Legal, or another agency. Maybe it's Adult Protective Services, or helping with maybe financial exploitation case where they're called in and we refer that to them. So anytime a resident wants to meet really with anybody, family, friend, or an agency, they should be allowed to visit with them. So it's vitally important to know that information. And we want to empower residents with that information so that they can really ask to be able to visit with those people. So the only person that can deny an ombudsman access to a resident is the resident themselves. And so all the power, like I say, my bumper sticker says the resident drives the bus. Everything that we do is based on the direction that we get from the resident. We only have permission to go into the medical records of a resident when we get permission from that resident. We can't rifle through that medical record. We are very respectful of HIPAA and not wanting to violate that. That medical record belongs to you, the resident. So just to give you an idea of the access to information that we have, and when we stand away from that, and when we are allowed to go through and look at that information. So I always like to bring up the resident rights slide, because to me, everything that happens, whether it's a complaint, whether it's something that comes from the Illinois Department of Public Health, from those regulators, those enforcers of the regulations, or from us, it's all going to trickle back to what the resident rights are. And when you look at all of these, there's a lot of information here that talks about making their own decisions, having that freedom of choice, accessing their own medical records, and remaining free from any threats. We have our dignity and respect, which to me, I always say that is the big kahuna. That's the big right that is the umbrella, and every other right that falls underneath it goes right back to dignity and respect. Because when there's a violation of one of the other rights, there's always a violation of treating that resident with dignity and respect. So going back to our access, we have access. The resident has the right to meet with us and meet privately if they want to. If it's too public or they think they're being overheard, the resident or the ombudsman has a right to ask the staff to give us a private room for a private conversation. They need to accommodate that. Staff lots of times will maybe hover around outside the door. It is amazing how often staff want to come in and empty the trash when we're in a room visiting with a resident, or come in and ask if they have enough water. It's amazing the attention that a resident sometimes gets just because we're in the room. So in these situations, we do remind the staff that we are allowed to meet with the resident privately. And like I said, if the staff cannot provide a private room, we do ask the resident if they preferred for us to close the door to their room. So just an indication of what the rights are for the ombudsman going to the resident's room and the resident's right to meet with us. So what does this all mean? What other information could there possibly be that anybody could have that could give them power to know what to do? It comes down to the annual survey that is done every year at each facility. That survey, is really more of an inspection. I really prefer the word inspection. I think maybe people would, have a more rigid posture when they knew that an inspection was coming along. But when you think about it, a survey sounds too much like Family Feud. I'm sorry, survey says, and then you get the information that comes about. So, but there are two types of surveys. There's the annual survey, which is that annual inspection that we talked about. And that's when you see IDPH, the Illinois Department of Public Health. I apologize with leading with the acronym. The Illinois Department of Public Health is the regulating agency over all long-term care facilities in the state of Illinois, and they are the agency that comes in and evaluates the facility on their compliance with the regulations that are set by both the state and the federal government. There's also what they call a complaint survey, and that happens when a resident or a family member or an ombudsman, only with the approval of the resident, or perhaps a mandated reporter who works in the facility, or anybody that observes what's going on, they themselves can call the Illinois Department of Public Health and they can report on their complaint line what's going on. And the Illinois Department of Public Health will take the facts that they get from that phone call, or there is an email address, both are in the chat for this presentation, and they will go in when it's not time for the annual inspection, annual survey, and they'll go into the facility and they will investigate that complaint. That's what's called a complaint survey. Those annual surveys are then, when you look at it, it's right. The annual survey must always be kept on usually the shelving or the entry area at the reception desk when you first go into a facility. So there's a binder that should be there that should have the annual surveys from the last 5 years should be in that binder. And you don't have to ask if you can see the results. That's up on that shelf because it's supposed to be there for the public to look at it. So, and sometimes I make this mistake when I want to see my mother's care plan. And I'll say, may I see my mother's care plan, or may I have a copy of my mother's care plan? To me, I'm a wordsmither, and whenever that provides an opportunity for somebody, a question of saying, may I have a copy, that allows the person you're talking to say, oh, yes or no. And just last week, I asked for a copy and they say, oh, well, you're entitled to it, but you can't have it now. So obviously I had worded my request improperly in my head. I was thinking I should have just said, I would like a copy of my mother's care plan. Same thing when you go in. If you can't find the binder and you're standing at that front desk, you can say, where is the annual survey binder? I don't see it. I'd like to see that, please. You know, you can still be mannerly without making it a question to be answered with a no. You just say, I would like to see it. And when you think about it, anybody that's going to tour a facility for a loved one, they would want to see that annual survey. What's going on over the last 5 years at this facility? And so you need to know that that is supposed to be right there, and you're supposed to be able to get it. And I'm having a loss of words of the phrase I'm coming up with. But what the survey says when you open that book is residents and families are also allowed to contribute to the annual survey process. So when you know with this presentation, when you now know that that annual survey is coming up on that facility, and nobody knows what it is. The facility doesn't, we don't know it. It's just a pop in, hello, we're here for a few days. And they go through and they audit a lot of the documents. They look to see how things are going in the facility with all of their senses to see what's going on. They have a random meeting where they'll randomly select some residents to come and talk to them about how things are going in the facility. Residents and families may contribute to this if they know what's going on, and they can be prepared for it. So during the year, have a notebook, jot down some stuff that you might think is a concern and that you want to make sure ends up in front of those surveyors. And those can be anything. It's something that you notice. My mom's water pitcher is always so bone dry that there's a white scaly dust on the inside of the pitcher. What does that indicate? She's not getting fresh water. That's an important issue. You can go to the Humane Society and see that they keep the water bowls full for the dogs and the cats there. Very least that we can expect for our residents is they have fresh water all the time. They're not getting fresh water. They're not getting hydrated. They're not getting hydrated. They could be getting a lot of urinary tract infections. So whereas some people might think that having water is a minor infraction, it's really not. All things build up if you give it time and space and not approach it and talk about it. You as a resident can approach a surveyor, and unless they're in a private meeting or something, you could say, hey, I know that you're in here and you must be a survey. Is there any chance that I can get a moment with you and talk to you about how things are going for me? And surveys should and will, if they have the time, hoping they have the time to sit down and talk to you about what your concerns might be. One of the things they might do is refer you to us. So either way, you're having your voice heard, which is a sense of empowerment for the resident. And then you're allowed to read the annual survey report. And like I said, it should be on display right when you first come into that facility. It's part of the introduction to the facility. And when they're proud of their results in a survey, you're going to find that more readily available on that shelf at the reception desk than possibly if they have a lot of violations against those regulations. So what I'm going to show you next is just some pictures, and this is where John's going to pick up in a moment on the next slide. We were going to try to put some pages on here from an annual survey so that you could see what it looks like when you open that binder. A lot of the annual surveys are many, many, many pages. So we've redacted the identification of the facility, and if there were any names, not any names, but any other private information that we really don't want to share on this presentation, we've redacted that. But even the complaint survey is done in the same format as the annual survey. So don't be afraid. We'll all hold hands here in a virtual way and get through these next 6 slides on what a survey looks like, just so that you don't have to use a poker face and pretend like you don't know what you're looking at. Okay, so this is page 1. I'm going to turn over to John at this point.
Thank you, Teresa. I sure appreciate that. I became an ombudsman a little over 2 years ago, and I pastor a church in the area, and I, believe it or not, was somewhat familiar with the process of turning complaints over to IDPH. But when I took my job and I got the very first survey in my desk, I took a look at that thing, and it was so long and it was filled with so many words that I was not familiar with. And what is this thing that I'm looking at? Well, our purpose today, we want to try to help you to understand what it is that you're looking at. This first page here is the introduction to a results of the findings that Department of Public Health had toward a complaint that was sent to them from an ombudsman in our office. Up in the very upper right corner, you'll see the date the survey was completed, and that was July the 20th of 2021. As you look on the right side, you'll see a list of general requirements for nursing and personal care. And as you look at that, that's going to give you a really good idea of the meat of the findings as you get into the document. We're not going to take time to read all of these. You'll be able to look at them yourself later. So I don't want to take a lot of your time up when you can read it yourself. But you notice a few things that are popping up. It says the facility shall provide necessary care and services. Well, when you see something like that, mark it down. You are reading results for things that they did not do in this process. It talks about how the facilities should provide nursing care that shall include at the minimum on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis. That's a big clue that there's some bombshells that are getting ready to pop up on this page. We see where they have the requirement to include the proper medications, and all of the treatments and procedures should be administered as ordered by the physician. And boy, you say, well, John, that certainly would happen to all facilities, but that is not the case. As individuals, family members, residents, you have the right to receive the care that your doctor orders. And these survey results will show you areas in which the facility is really not doing the things that they should be. We see here on the second page, if you turn the page, Teresa, we're going to see where the findings of the survey said that based on the interview and record review, the facility failed to administer anti-epileptic and anticoagulation medicine as ordered by the physician for 1 of 3 residents. When the survey team goes into the facility, they always pick records, usually from 3 residents at a minimum, one of those including the resident that the complaint is sent in for. Now, you are able to send that in, residents, for yourself. Any of you that have loved ones in the facility, you can certainly send in that complaint for your loved ones. And if you send in that complaint, you can either do it by telephone. I think there's a link that's in the comments for both the telephone number and an email address directly to IDPH. Let me tell you, you'll get through a lot quicker from your email. Sometimes if you call, you're going to be on the telephone a long time. So we encourage you to just send in an email. In that email, you'll want to include your name, your address, and your telephone number, as well as the name and the facility. And if you have the date of birth for your resident, and include in that complaint, just spell out the complaint in as simple of a form as you can. Include any pertinent staff names, include dates and times and descriptions. And if you want to get a copy of the results of that survey, you need to include that you want to be identified, and make sure that you either list your name and address or your telephone number, and it's a good thing to include both, because they may call with other questions that they may need to know some things from you on. So if you include all that in your request, they'll send that not only to Ombudsman, but they'll also send that to any of you. You have the right to that. Before I became an ombudsman, I was acquainted with the complaint process, and my grandparents were in a nursing home, and I helped take care of them. And you can have all of that sent to you. As you look down at the very bottom of page number 2, you'll see R1's medical documents, diagnose, and it lists really a huge list of things that is wrong with that resident. As you look through the documents that you're going to be looking at, you're going to find out that they leave abbreviations like resident. They'll list R1, R2, R3. They'll list the director of nursing as being the DON, the administrator as being admin. You'll see a little bit later where other people in the facility are, for instance, most nurses and staff members are listed as V, V1, V2, V3. Here in this particular document, they go all the way up through V11. So you can see they do a pretty thorough job of what they do. Next slide, Teresa. On page 3, you'll see where residents were very, very ill because of the facility kind of dropping the ball. And there were many different issues that happened. One of the most important things, this person was not given medication for over, I think it's 5 weeks, from sometime in May all the way up until July. So actually it was a little closer to 6 weeks. And as a consequence of that, they began to have some very severe seizures. The facility, when they called the EMTs, they discounted the severity of those seizures. And when you read through this, you'll find that as well documented in the notes. They had said that the resident had a seizure that lasted, maybe 30 seconds, 90 seconds, when in reality, it ended up being over 5 minutes. That's a huge difference in severity. And all of this is documented. We'll see where a second medication, valproic acid, was not given for a number of days. And you'll find out on the next slide, page number 4, where the physician had documented an order for this medication, and one of the nurses, a registered nurse in the facility, actually changed that order. Nobody knows why, but the doctor had called in a change in the medication, and for whatever reason, that registered nurse that took the order over the phone, instead of increasing the medication, actually stopped and discontinued that medication. You'll see at the bottom of page 4 where the facility keeps an MAR. You say, what is that? That's a medication administration record on every single resident. And you, as an ombudsman, with the permission of the resident, are able to view that record. If you're the power of attorney for one of your family members, you have the right to view that medical assessment administration record. And it keeps a list of when the resident got every dosage of medicine and what time and how often in that day. And this particular resident went from May the 1st until July the 8th on one of her medications. And as a result, she ended up with a terrible seizure. Next slide, number 5 of 6. You'll see midway down where the primary care physician, V6, made a statement that, listen, the facility misrepresented his order. He was willing to testify to that place, and he was very upset that his patient didn't get medication for over 2 months. As we go to the very last slide, number 6 of 6, you'll see where they're very, very thorough. They found a discrepancy report. The facility found out that there was a discrepancy, but did not notify the physician, even though they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. They tried to keep that to themselves. And of course, as disclosed in this document, they couldn't keep it to themselves. They got caught. Now, just before I close, I want to kind of report on this to you. There was a findings report that was sent under a separate letter, and they were disciplined severely because of these mistakes. First of all, the facility typically qualifies after a good annual survey for a 2-year license. This facility's 2-year license was stripped away, and they were given a 6-month conditional license that ran from last October 29th all the way through April 28th of this year. So that was a very severe finding. They were given a $25,000 fine for this incident. That may sound like a lot of money, but typically those fines are reduced at least a bit in order to receive cooperation from the facility. But probably 2 of the biggest findings, this facility was placed on a quarterly list of violators that is published by Illinois Department of Health that's available for the public to review. And when prospective residents' families look at that list and they say, well, where am I going to put mom? Where am I going to put dad? That's going to raise a lot of red flags. And the biggest thing, this facility is still operating on a restriction. They cannot train their own CNAs for 6 months. Any new person that's going to be a CNA is having to be sent out either to Illinois Central College or another training facility to get that training to become an employee. And that can add up very quickly to even more than that $25,000 fine. So I hope this helps you. Don't be intimidated by reading these reports. Listen, if I can get through it and begin to understand it, you can too. So be very proactive for your loved ones. It makes a difference.
Teresa, can I jump in for a minute?
Sure.
So I put in the chat the link to where people can actually find the nursing home violation reports. It's posted quarterly, and I can tell you that IDPH is a little slow with posting, but they do wind up there eventually. You
Sure.
could also find surveys on the Care and Compare website, also for federally funded facilities. But when both Teresa and John talked about filing complaints, if we've learned anything in the last 2 years, it is document, document, and document. So unless you absolutely have no other way to submit a complaint, you are always better off doing it via email. So you have your documentation, you have your copies of what you've said to them, so there is no misunderstanding. The more specific information you can give anybody, the better, to, you know, when it happened, who was present, anything you can give, because and a family can write a survey or write a complaint just as easily as a resident can. The same way, you know, the families have the right to look at the reports. They don't always tell families these things, but the more information you give when you file a complaint, the better chance you have of them ever finding the complaint. You know, like the one where John was talking about, obviously the ER filed that complaint, and it was very easy to go backwards. But technically, when a facility misses a medication, they're supposed to report themselves. It's a med error. It's a
Right.
reportable offense. And so if you know that your family members had missed doses, even when they call and apologize, and it happens, it's human error. But that should be a question. Was there a med error report filed? Same thing with an
Right.
injury.
Right, right.
Hey,
Thank-
wait a second.
Thanks for reiterating that, Carrie. Can you guys hear me? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, I
Okay,
can hear you.
thank you. Thank you. That was great information, John. I hope everybody got as much out of it as I did, even though it was my second time around, I think. But no, it's a lot of information. If you see on that one form in the middle column there, it says F770. That's what they call an F tag from the surveyors. So, you know, the question is, what the heck is an F tag, right? So, like it says here, it documents or the identified non-compliance by with the federal certification requirements using a federal tag, the F tag, right? And it's a numbering system along with a lot of detailed explanation of each of the deficiencies. So this inspection, the survey, is necessary for the nursing facility to continue to receive funding from Medicare and Medicaid. The seriousness of the deficiency of the F tag is determined by the scope and severity of whatever happened, right? And there's a grid that I chose not to put up here on the screen just because we went through 6 pages of the survey that you'll become familiar with whenever you go look at the annual survey. But this grid has it defined. It's an interpretation of the substantial compliance or the substandard care, or it can go as far as determining if there's immediate jeopardy of resident or residents, if it's systemic. So for each deficiency, the surveyor determines the level of harm to the resident involved and the scope of the problem in the nursing home itself. The surveyor then assigns, through this grid I refuse to show you just for your own sanity, an alphabetic score. And so they have it on a table where on one part they're assigning it a letter, like went through, I think it's A through L, and then the other one, I think it might have numbers that determine it and to give it an actual identification. So again, the finding of this substandard quality of care indicates that the facility was found to have a significant deficiency, and it has to be addressed. So when the surveyors find this, they send a letter to the facility and they tell them that they have to correct the deficiency to protect the health and safety of the residents. And they give them a specific time frame to submit in writing a document that tells what the corrective action will be. So there's also a harm tag. And when they issue a harm tag, you've got to remember that, especially older adults can bruise easily. They can get a skin tear, or even if it's not a physical bruising or skin tear on the resident, making a resident feel upset can be considered actual harm. So then there's the immediate jeopardy that we spoke of. And this is a situation in which the facility's noncompliance with one or more requirements has caused or is likely to cause serious injury, harm, impairment to a resident. So, let's go back and look at the resident rights. As I said, everything has a dotted line back to resident rights. Just because they've moved into a long-term care facility, they don't lose their rights. And we try to make that clear and educate residents and staff and family members a lot about that. The freedom of religion, their freedom to vote, to participate in social and community activities, to present grievances. Residents should feel empowered to be able to voice when something isn't going right in their life. If they don't like the food, if the food is too cold, if the butter never melts on my green beans, why is that? It's because my green beans are always cold, And so we go back again to this knowledge is power. That resident should have the ability and has the right to meet with an ombudsman, with any other community organizations or social service groups, or any other advocate, or anybody in the general public, right? So remember when I talked about all of this, I talked also about, I talked about the F tags. There's actually a quality of life F tag, and it's defined as an individual's sense of well-being, level of satisfaction with life, and feeling of self-worth and self-esteem. So for long-term care facilities residents, this includes the basic sense of satisfaction with themselves, with the environment, with the care that they're receiving, the accomplishments of their own desired goals, right? So that goes back to the present grievances when they have them. So it's important to realize that anything is included in that right, their own desired goals and their control over their own life while they're living in that facility. So what did I include in legislative mandates? It's important as we go through this journey for this Resident and Family Support Council. At the beginning, maybe we talked about a timeline of when things took place back in 1965 and how through time, everything else has come about to help residents of long-term care facilities. The Older Americans Act in the 1960s, 2016, the federal nursing home regulations were revised to include additional details on how facilities are mandated to honor a resident's rights. And then we have the Illinois Nursing Home Care Act, which closely follows the language of the federal regulations. So, the fear of retaliation is one of the most common barriers of residents wanting to advocate for themselves. And that's where we step in. We realize that there's psychological and psychosocial reasons why a resident needs somebody to help them speak up and have their voice heard. We realize that there might be physical and mental challenges for a resident to have their voice heard. That's what we're here for. And they may lack the information that they need to know they even have a right to speak up and say something. That's what we're here for, to educate them on them, to empower them to speak on their own, and to help them speak if they need somebody to help them get the message across to the facility. Residents receive quality of life and quality of care when the core values of personal-centered care are followed, and that's giving them the choice, giving them dignity, respect, self-determination, and a purposeful life. And that means being able to air whatever bothers you and hopefully having it resolved. And that's what we're there for. Information is power is what it comes down to. So if you want more information about their survey process, There's a link here. It's included in the chat. I know that Stephen, is a great sharer of information in the chat stream, and a virtual pat on the back to him for that. You can also contact your regional ombudsman and talk to them about, I can't find that binder. Where did you say that binder was? Or I asked about it and they told me it was being updated. Do you know what it involves, updating that binder? Finding a 3-hole punch and putting the most recent one to the top and putting the one that was at the back and taking that one out. There should be no series of days that it's being updated. And you can also contact the senior helpline as well. Also wanted to let you know the recommended resources that are always included on the chat stream is the Illinois Long-Term Care Ombudsman General website, and the Consumer Choice website, and the National Consumer Voice link is on there as well. This last page is only one put in there by my marketing department that includes my name. In case you happen to be in the 6-county area in our region, you can reach out to me directly, and then you can always use that senior helpline that has the 800 number and the 888 number. And so now I think we're opening it up to any questions or comments anybody might have.
So I did forget to mention something. If you look at the IDPH website with the quarterly reports, if you click on the docket number, it will completely open up the whole complaint and survey, and you can read everything just like what they were showing here. So you've got to click on that docket number if you look at an actual complaint to get everything.
Thank you for that. What a fantastic presentation. I mean, it was extremely full of knowledge. I know this is an area that is very
Hi, man.
Lee, we can't hear you, Lee.
I'm sorry. I think we've got a question from Alan. Alan?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Marie. I'm a resident of the facility in Evanston, Illinois, and it's my first time at doing one of these meetings with the ombudsman. And thank you so much for all the information you're giving us today. And I work very closely with, she was on here earlier, Candace Mitchell, who's the ombudsman for our city. I work very closely with it. It's been a major, big help for me the last year and a half. And I'm very grateful to her. And she's also helping a very close friend of mine at the moment. And she's incredible. And I'm living in the nursing home for the past 35 years, actually. So I have a lot of experience. Been through a lot of surveys, and also a resident council president one time, and sat in exit meetings with the state and such. And it's amazing, and I'm grateful to all of you, and hope to work closely with some other people and help other residents in my situation. My biggest concern is Smurf facilities, which I just live. I'm in a skilled facility right now. I was just forced out of my home in Greenwood Care here in Evanston after 33 years because of medical issues. And it had transferred to a skilled facility in the same town. But yeah, there's a lot of problems going on, especially the Smurf homes.
Yeah, Alan, you're so right. We really appreciate you being here. The Smurf homes stand for Specialized Mental Health Rehab Facilities. For those of you who don't know that acronym, we know we are full of acronyms in this world of long-term care. And I hope the information today helped empowered people to be able to feel, because the survey process is so tenuous. People don't understand it, and then we don't even know what questions to ask. So it was really it's really very helpful to get this information, because a couple of questions came to my mind. If I don't know if anybody else has a question and you'd like to unmute yourself, please do feel free while you're looking at how to unmute yourself. Teresa and John, I don't know if you can really answer this question for me. What's the difference if I give a complaint to IDPH and I give a complaint to the ombudsman? What's the difference there?
Oh, that's a really good question. So if you give a complaint, if you you're a resident, I'm assuming, and sending a complaint to me, and I'm going to investigate it. You've given me permission to investigate, which gives me permission to, investigate the complaint, look at your medical record. But what if the complaint is at the point where we're not getting any cooperation from the facility, or if during the investigation, you as a resident just feel like it is just escalating. I don't know how long the resolution takes, but I tell you what, I want more done than just trying to come up with a handheld resolution where we all sing kumbaya and everything's going to be fine. And it goes back and it starts all over again in 2 weeks. We've been through this a couple of times. What more can be done? I will tell you that if you give me permission, I can submit the complaint to IDPH on your behalf. But I can't go to IDPH with that complaint without your permission. That's an additional grant that I get from you. Remember, the resident drives the bus on how far this investigation goes with the enforcers, or if we're going to just try to find a resolution to your complaint with the facility. So if you, while I'm investigating, decide, Teresa's investigating it for me, good for her, but by golly, this is Saturday afternoon and I'm sick and tired of this, and I'm calling that 800 number right now, and I'm going to get the IDPH in on the game. And that's fine. I applaud you for that. Does it mean that I stop investigating? No. IDPH might be investigating your complaint, which is fine, but how do I know that that complaint is just you? What if what you're complaining about turns out to be that there's a lot of other residents having the very same issue, and it's really more a systemic issue? So I want to check into that as well. So you are more than happy to call IDPH directly, and you're more than happy to say, Teresa, call IDPH on my behalf.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Again, I know because, we do talk about this fear of retaliation, and and that's where a lot of people do get a little nervous about telling other people. So even it might be a good first step to talk to the ombudsman about the issue, and they could even give you maybe even more of the courage to bring that forward to IDPH.
And you know what else they can do is so you've called IDPH, let's say, and I'm still investigating, and your daughter comes in and you tell her, well, I called IDPH, and then she says to me, well, since my mom called IDPH, does it mean I can't? Because I'd like to tell them my side of the story, because I don't know if mom got all the details, and I want them to know everything. Your daughter can call IDPH. They can have more than one phone call on the one complaint. That's fine too. Strength in numbers.
Yes, that's really important to know. Are there any other questions that we have?
Yeah, so we had a question a little while ago asking if the link that Carrie put in with the surveys was all facilities, or if they were just skilled nursing, and the answer to that is they are just skilled nursing facilities.
That's valid. When you think about how IDPH is the one that does the surveying for skilled care, when it comes to supportive living, that would be through my acronyms are scrambling. Yes, thank you. My acronyms.
Health and Family Services, as well as for the SNFs, the specialized mental health rehab facilities. They are actually, their survey happens through HFS, Health and Family Services.
Yes.
And those surveys are not publicly available. So you're going to be searching for a long time if you're looking for the surveys for those other types of facilities. And actually the nursing home violators is skilled and intermediate care. So nursing homes is what you should think of. So it's not just skilled, but if it's an intermediate care nursing facility, those would be on there too. But that's the way I tend to tell people to think about it. If it's an actual nursing home, their information should be available on that site. But the other survey reports are not available online to my knowledge.
Yeah, and part of it is the nursing homes have federal regulations, and that whole FTAG that Teresa was talking about. That's the whole process for nursing homes. They're a lot more heavily regulated than the rest of the long-term care facilities due to that federal oversight. You also talked about mandated reporters. Are ombudsmen considered mandated reporters?
We are not. And as the way I like to say it, as a visual, I try to tell people it's not because we were at the end of the line for mandated reporters when they were handing out cards, and mandated reporters don't get cards. They get a statement from a judge making them a mandated reporter. But people think, oh, you just ran out, right? No, We are purposely not mandated reporters for a very valued reason. It's not because we're lesser than in the value of what we do. It's because we are just as important. And the reason we cannot be a mandated reporter is because we have a tenet to our program, which is confidentiality. It's a big deal. How can I promise you that if you say, let me tell you what's wrong with this place, and you go on a rant just to vent, because we all vent about all kinds of stuff, right? And you tell me everything that's wrong, and then you say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to do anything about it right at this point. I'm just telling you, just because you asked, I just don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to do anything about it. Keep this confidential for now. And I'm sworn to that. I won't tell anybody about it. What I will say is I won't tell anybody, but when I'm walking through here next time and I'm just moseying down the hall and I see that you're not, you know, that you're sitting there watching TV, if it's in between innings or during a commercial, I might stop in to see if the problem fixed itself. And if maybe at that point you want me to help you, but I absolutely can't break that vow. So I can't be a mandated reporter where I'm bound to report the issue and still be tell you that I'll keep your secret or that I'll keep it confidential. The two are opposite each other.
That makes so much sense. And then that makes it a little bit easier again, sometimes just to bear it all to that ombudsman. And then you can kind of sort through what it actually is, what that real complaint really looks like for you, and how, and to process yourself. And what does a solution to this look like for me as well? I think that's really important, Teresa. Thank you for explaining it that way. That was really, really helpful. I think, Stephen, have we gotten another question?
Jessica had her hand up.
Okay, Jessica.
I'm just going to real quick on the mandated reporter issue. If you look at the state law that lists the mandated reporters in Illinois, the long-term ombudsmen are listed. The reason we are not mandated reporters is because the feds have come out and said that ombudsmen cannot be mandated reporters. So I just wanted to clarify that for somebody who's familiar with the law. You might say, well, why are you saying that? Because when I read the list of the people who are mandated reporters, ombudsmen are on that list. And it is because of the feds have provided direction and clarification saying that ombudsmen cannot be mandated reporters.
Hey, Jessica, let me ask you a question on that. So I just learned, and it's not Illinois, it's California, but I'm curious. If an ombudsman in California is in a facility and physically sees abuse, they are allowed to report that. Are you allowed to report that in Illinois?
So that would be something, and it applies the same in California. It's going to be at the discretion of the state ombudsman. And so something like that, an ombudsman would contact the state ombudsman for permission to take that action.
Okay.
So if we're talking about who can actually make a complaint, is it just residents in the facility, or if I'm a friend that's visiting one of my friends that lives in a long-term care facility, can I make a complaint?
Yes, you can. And we get complaints from people from all walks of life. We get it from the kids. We get it from the sister. We get it from the neighbor goes to visit. We get it from law enforcement at times. We've had a police officer call. We get phone calls from caseworkers at hospitals, from doctors or nurses in the emergency room who see something and they say something and they call us. Other residents will say something about another resident and we'll say, well, we can investigate your friend who lives across the hall. We can talk to your friend across the hall, and if she wants us to investigate, we will, but that's up to her. Again, it's up to that individual whether or not they want us to do anything. Anybody else can pipe in about any other walk of life anybody who sees something and feels that they need to say something about the conditions for residents in facilities.
That's helpful.
So, Lee, Joyce has her hand up, but we will get to you, Joyce. But first, I wanted to let everyone know that new public health guidance came out today. Earlier, I posted a link in the chat to it. I'm not sure if it's going to work for everyone because it's a Facebook link, and because I tried to find one with public health, but they hadn't updated their system yet, or their website yet. So I haven't had a chance to look through it all. The big change is that they've modified it from fully vaccinated to up to date. Meaning you've had your full shot regimen and your boosters. But before we get to Joyce's question, Lee, I was wondering if you could give a plug for our next meeting.
Absolutely, because it's really right along the same sort of lines. We're actually going to have our legislative liaison that works in the Department of Aging. She's going to talk about there's been a lot of legislation this session when the state was in session that was around nursing homes and what was going on in the long-term care world. So because of that, we felt that everybody really needs to understand all this great legislation that's really happened for the most part in the favor of those who of those that live in long-term care communities. So we are going to be having a brief synopsis about all that and give everyone that opportunity to be able to ask questions about it and feel updated about what this all looks like, as well as get a little bit of an education about what that legislative process looks like, so that we can understand it better, so we can do things like Carrie asked and be able to advocate to our legislators about various things that we support ourselves personally. So thank you, Stephen, for reminding me to do that. If you want to go ahead and I don't want people to leave without doing the poll and putting your zip codes in the chat. If you could please put your zip codes in the chat, that'd be great. I forgot to put that reminder at the beginning. And Stephen, did you have the question?
Joyce, and now I can't see her name, but Joyce had her hand up for a moment. And I don't know if she wanted to unmute herself and ask her question. I know I sent her a couple of messages in the chat. Hopefully that answered her question, but if you have anything more.
Okay, well, let's see. The time is 4:58, and I'm just seeing any other questions that came to my mind when we were talking. I really like the hints that you had about documenting. I think that was dynamite for us whenever something happens, because they'll ask, what day was it? What time was it? I think that that's important. A really great hints to learn, as well as assisting us with some of those acronyms. This world can get really, really confusing when you enter that long-term care world. And that's something to, don't feel like you need to know all of these acronyms that are out there. You can even just call your ombudsman and ask them, what does DON mean? I keep hearing this and I have no idea what it means. So that's something. Don't feel like just because you don't understand some of these acronyms that it keeps you from having knowledge about things. So do feel free to reach out to any of us about that as well. I mean, this again, knowledge. Teresa, I think you started off with knowledge is power. And so thank you for imparting all that knowledge. You and John did a dynamite job today. Joyce, do you want to ask your question?
I just wanted to ask, possibly, Steve, you would know, is there someone else that I can talk to? Maybe this isn't a question for this whole group. Or do you think it is in regard to what facilities, what the different rules are at a intermediate facility, like my mom is in rehab, versus a skilled nursing home?
Yeah, and so your question was specifically, can a skilled or intermediate facility provide catheter care? Am I correct?
Yes.
So just to answer Joyce, a skilled and a rehab facility are the same regulations. That becomes people get a little confused about that because it's just how they get advertised. But a skilled facility and a rehab facility are the same place, as well as the regulations for an intermediate care facility. So they do all have, and they're all bounded by the federal regulations as well as the state regulations. We actually have a sheet that we created for one of our meetings. We talked about the various regulations, so you can get on our YouTube channel and you can even watch that, as well as, Joyce, if you want, I'll put my email in there and I can email you a sheet that has all the links to the various regulations for the different types of long-term care facilities in Illinois.
But Joyce,
And
I think more the question of what she's asking still comes down to licensure. So where some skilled facilities are licensed to do more than others. You know, just because you're licensed as a
Correct.
skill or an ICF does not mean you're licensed to do everything under that scope. So that would depend on what the facility has chose they're willing to do to be, and what they're willing to license for. Okay, because, you know, even more of a simple line is like a feeding tube. One of the ICFs I looked at for my son was not licensed for feeding tubes. So that automatically took them off the table when we were looking. So it's getting deeper into more than just what type of facility it is. It is what are they licensed for after their original license.
Correct. So would I talk to my ombudsman then in regard to this catheter situation?
I would speak with your director of nursing.
Yeah, they're not allowed to have catheters, but my question is that my mom's on hospice, and so the hospice is taking care of the catheter, you know, inserting it, you know, they're in there 5 days a week. So the facility itself is not really supporting the catheterization. So that's why I want to see who I talk to.
So
That would
Joyce,
be IDPH. I don't even think you know, that would
Oh,
be.
okay.
Joyce, I think you could call your ombudsman for some guidance on that.
Okay, great. That's what I was.
Yeah, and
yeah.
if you get on the Illinois Department on Aging website, you could see what county who covers what. But I put my email address in the chat, so you can email me too, and I can point you in the right direction of the regional ombudsman in your area.
Yeah, and Lee and I sent her the information privately in a chat as to who she can contact in terms of an ombudsman. And the document you're referring to with the list of facilities and who regulates them, and then there's a list of ombudsmen throughout the state. That's towards the top of the chat. There are links to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Stephen. You're always good in the chat there. You work our chat well for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that being said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to end the recording, but I will go ahead and stay on. Thank you, everybody. And again, kudos to Teresa and John for a fantastic job on this presentation.
I think this was great.
Thanks.